Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are. Welcome to another episode of the Unlocked podcast. I am your host, Alan Helton, ecosystem engineer at Momento, and with me today is Kristiyan. Let's get kicked off with a little bit about you. What do you do, and what is your experience with Valkey?
Overall, I have over 13 years of professional experience now. Anything from B2B, B2C, some more early stage startups, mid stage, and everything else. I used to work at Redis for a year, and currently I'm the founder and CTO of BetterDB. We're aiming to be the observability and monitoring player for Valkey.
Tell me about your time at Redis. What did you do there?
So I was the engineering manager for the visual developers tools and platforms, which basically encapsulates Redis inside desktop, Redis inside Visual Studio Code, while then we launched the cloud module of Redis inside, as well as to some extent Redis Copilot, some exploratory work for the MCP server, the N8N integration, and pretty much most of the things that developers usually use to interact with Redis.
So tell us, you had a claim that you wanted to be like the observability company for Valkey. What does that mean?
Ever since Valkey separated itself from Redis, and the main core of the product, the database itself, from the caching cloud, whichever way you're actually using Valkey today, has been getting more and more love and attention and is being heavily developed. There were two major releases last year, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe mine was at the beginning of this year. But it's diverging more and more from Redis. The two companies seems to have sort of different directions that each of them are taking and aiming for. And Valkey doesn't appear to have any dedicated, or I should say, it doesn't appear to have much dedicated tooling. A lot of the things are essentially Redis hand-me-downs, such as the Redis exporter from Prometheus. A lot of people using Valkey are using Redis inside. Maybe that will change with the official launch of Valkey Admin the other day. Maybe not. A lot of people are still using Redis inside for VS Code. And a lot of the things is essentially a patchwork of, well, you can just export some of the data into Prometheus, you can build your own file of dashboard, and then you can try and sort of piece together what's going on. There are multiple different problems with that. First of all, the Redis exporter, as far as I know, and as far as I've researched, which is about a week old, so take it with a grain of salt, doesn't support the specific Valkey command that Valkey has been introducing in terms of monitoring and observability. And second of all, most of these tools lack specific historical and persistent data and information. So basically, if you use Valkey Admin, Redis Insight, or even the CLI, you can specifically see what's happening exactly now, but there's no way when you wake up to see what happened last night. Why was there a spike? Why did your bill surge? Why was there a bunch of keys skipped over and over and over again? And that's something that several people have professed as a particular pain point, and the main thing that we're essentially trying to solve. Here, I can expand a little bit more, and because we are going to talk at some point about our VS Code extension. The way I see things is that the Visual Studio Code extensions and things like that are essentially lowering the barrier of entry. This means that I, as a developer, I don't need the CLI syntax, I don't need from all the specific commands. I can spin up a quick Valkey already installed. I can connect it from my IDE, and then while I'm experimenting with, let's say, the required libraries, I can see what's happening in the database and verify it from the exact same space without any alt and tab, context switch, and so on. Redis Insight and Valkey Admin are a little bit more operator heavy. I don't think they are strictly speaking for developers such as Redis in more DevOps, InfOps focused for people that actually are looking for something specific and they know how to find it and they manage either a bunch of databases or a bunch of clusters or a bunch of other things and they need send the light through to access and see what's going on in this specific moment. And what the actions that they are taking someplace else, be it the AWS admin or GCP or someplace else, is reflecting in the database. And then The thing that is working on trying to solve is what is happening over a long period of time. What was happening last week, what was happening yesterday, trying to detect, summarize, and award something that's specific for Valkey, and it was just the generic monitoring that one of the other places are currently offering.
Let's just properly introduce this VS Code extension that you worked on. And then I would love to hear, how is that solving problems for developers specifically?
It allows you to connect, disconnect, and manage your database instances, basic COD operations, create, reproduce, and delete almost all possible key types within those databases, then provides a basic information layer of the type of the database, how much memory, CPU, and all this current handler. It has a nice CLI, and the thing that I'm using it the most for, it has a lot of shortcut combinations where you can add, update, and delete keys without touching your mouse at any point of the process. When I started BetterDB, the main goal was as I mentioned, the monitoring and observability layer, which means that while I'm developing it, I'm constantly switching between several different Valkey instances. I'm either writing randomizing scripts that are just inserting a bunch of data or pulling a bunch of data in order to simulate world or what's happening when I work for using it, or at the very least in order to seed a database with data so I have something to visualize and test on. And I got tired of out and dubbing to the terminal, connecting through Valkey CLI, and trying to figure out the correct command in order to see the number of keys or the total memory used by the database or something like that. So essentially dedicated a few hours on a Saturday to build a side project that solves that my own particular pain point. And hopefully others.
I love the effort that you're putting forth to it, because it really does sound like it is, to quote you, really lowering that barrier to entry of actually maintaining and building against a Valkey cluster. Because CLI might not be a super intuitive thing for all developers. Myself being a career application engineer versus something like a systems engineer, CLIs were completely foreign to me. It was all IDE, all GUI. Let's poke around and find out, which sounds exactly like what you're building here. So let's slide over. We've mentioned Valkey Admin a couple of times already, and that's brand new. That is a thing that is hot off the presses. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that and your experience with that so far?
Ever since it was released, I think it was yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't tried the official version that was out there. I just want to pick it up. I have poked around it in December of last year and January of this year. Originally, I tried to use it. It wasn't running on Linux. It was only for Mac, if I'm not mistaken. So I started taking the necessary steps in order to get it to work on Linux. Then somebody beat me to it and actually opened the pull request for that.
You know what? I think that actually might have been me opening up that pull request right ahead of you.
It could be.
Because
Look on the bright side, you led me. I don't know, I haven't seen the process of doing so.
All right, great. That's what I call teamwork right there. I submitted a PR to add support for Linux and Windows both. Well, Windows subsystem for Linux.
So that's the first time that we are officially talking, and it turns out that we met each other a month or 2 months ago in GitHub issue.
Yeah, how funny is that? So when so you said you haven't used it since its launch. It hasn't technically been made generally available yet. It was announced very recently in preview. What I like about it, compared to using the CLI, is that it gives you a graphical representation of the entire cluster, all of the nodes, the health in those nodes, the standard monitoring metrics that you'd have for CPU, memory, so on and so forth. And it kind of just works. You basically hit connect and all that stuff is immediately available. Now, whenever you're going in and troubleshooting something like that, or troubleshooting an issue in Valkey, what are your top things that you're looking for?
The CLI, I would start with the log, if I could get as much as possible. And then for the, because everything that Valkey stores in the logs is actually in memory and they rotate whenever they're filled out, I would just be hoping that they haven't filled out yet, and I can actually get the information that I need in that specific moment. After that, it's gonna be the basic developer experience for everything else. Check any other logs, be it, as I mentioned, things pulled from Prometheus and Grafana, or just go into the implementation that's actually using Valkey and try to figure out where the problem is in the code.
So tracking back to what you made, what BetterDB made for this VS Code plugin, are you able to do all of those things that you just listed inside of the extension?
I don't know. I think actually the test is much more simplistic. It's letting the Chevy operators that know what specifically are doing and also debug everything. It's aimed for just people that are, I want to say, casually poking around and evaluating the Valkey, wanting to test it out without, as you mentioned, going over the complex CLI syntax. Or for people like me that are developing something else for Valkey and just want to take a look at it without having to alt and tab all the time.
The reason that you built the Visual Studio Code extension, the reason Valkey Admin exists, the reason Redis Insights exist, would you say those are because the developer experience needs help? Or do we even consider it a developer experience thing? You know, are we considering developer experience more of like Glide and SDKs that connect?
That's a complex question. I think that both fall under the developer experience in different parts of it. The Glide and the different SDKs are things that you need in order to be able to develop your own application that uses Valkey already on the back end. But then you'll need tools that help you visualize the data, manipulate it, play around with it, and in general just not have to go through the CLI all the time. Many years ago, we had PHP which was essentially connect to a MySQL database, visualize it, run queries against it instead of building it through the CLI. That's the way I started writing PHP many years ago, and my first interactions with MySQL. Right now, I don't install it, it's annoying, and I use MySQL solely now that it's just easier to do it through the CLI. But back when I was in high school and I had to get started, having something visual helps you essentially be guided through the process of discovering, hey, this is the way you can look at a database. These are your basic data types. This is the way you can add and remove something. And then you can actually go and see how that either implemented or how you can do it via the Quant library or via something else. And other than developers, you share a lot of DevOps, SquadOps, InfOps, however you want to call it, people that are literally speaking developers. But they are using Redis and Valkey to some extent, even if they are just the people that are actually provisioning it for a third client or something like that. And whenever you provision something for a client, it doesn't make sense to go to the CLI and check everything there when you can just have a bit of nice graphical user interface to check it down, verify that it's provisioned, verify the permissions, check out the data inside, and so on. I honestly think that a lot of the Redis Insight and Valkey admin usage is, strictly speaking, senior developers that know what they're doing and they're just gonna go in the CLI and take care of it, but it's all of the people and personas that are working around and with the developers.
But as you said, you know, to put it in a different way, you know, there's operators, there's developers that are building, there's a whole lot that goes into managing something at that performance, at that scale for an organization. So as we kind of come closer to the end of the episode, I wanted to ask you a question that is more forward looking. So we're talking about tooling and we're, you know, talking about why and, you know, what, but looking ahead, what do you think is coming out in the near future? Are there any needs that we have that are not currently being satisfied?
I think To everything that depends on how Valkey is gonna continue to evolve. I mean, up to 2 major versions ago, you could practically use anything that Redis was putting out there with Valve. Over the last year and a half, Redis seems more focused on vector search, vector sets, and things. Rather than put a time where we need to support AI bucket, while Valkey seems to be focused more on optimizing every little piece of performance that can be taken out of that technology and just beating on every possible benchmark. And also exporting a little bit more information for debugging and monitoring purposes, which is awesome. So if that trend continues, it depends on what Valkey is gonna continue to export and focus on. From my own personal viewpoint, which might be a little bit biased because as I mentioned, we are trying to build something that's focused from monitoring and observability. The main pain point that I see from people is that, as I mentioned, the buffers for logs are rotating. So if you try to look further back in time than the log is supporting, you can't find information. So you need to be able to see what just happened a while ago and then compare it X number of days, weeks, or months ago in order to be able to figure out the changes. You need to be able to analyze over a longer period of time which patterns of keys were hit over and over, which was there, which weren't responding with anything, in order to be able to debug the issues with your system and within your system. It will be nice to be able to verify and view bursts, either of connections or clients that are trying to connect your database but are failing, which might show that something is either exposed or somebody trying to attack you in some specific way. They might be missing something. We are all humans, and we all have our own extremely limited perspective, which is why it's nice to talk with other humans and figure things out together. And build in public, throw it out there and get as much feedback as possible and iterate on it.
Yeah, no doubt. You're speaking my language right now. But anyway, so we're out of time. Thank you so much for all of your insights and your time and for making that Visual Studio Code extension. Again, we're going to link that in the show notes. Encourage people to try it out. Thank you.
Likewise, thanks so much for having me. And I'm actually working on a few things for the Visual Studio Code extension that will be released next week.
All right, great.
So good timing.
Yeah, that's exciting. I can't wait to see him. All right, well, thank you very much, and we'll catch you next time.